I had a big plan. I wanted to have children by the age of 30. I wanted my first child at 30. I wanted my career to happen before I settled down. And I had my last at 30, so that didn't work out.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids or Childfree podcast. Welcome to the Kids or Childfree podcast. Today, I'm speaking with a mom who has led what I'll say is quite an unconventional and adventurous life. And I really love Paula's story, which you're going to hear in a moment, because it debunks the idea that motherhood and parenthood needs to look a certain way. A lot of times when we think about having kids, that comes with a whole lifestyle. It comes with the white picket fence. It comes with staying in one location. It comes with whatever else we envision parenthood and raising children to look like. And while that may not be all of our visions, I think a lot of us discount the possibilities that still exist when we have kids to continue living an adventurous life, one filled with travel and new experiences and different cultures. Today, I'm speaking with Paula Barnes, who is a travel creator, podcast host, and expat who has spent nearly 2 decades living across Asia. After relocating from Australia to Taiwan in 2006 with her young family, Paula went on to live in multiple countries, embracing new cultures and building a global lifestyle. Now based between Hong Kong, Singapore, and Sydney, Paula shares authentic travel insights, expat experiences, and insider tips through Truly Expat Travel. Paula is passionate about empowering women, especially over 45, to explore the world with confidence and creates a supportive community for meaningful, experience-led travel. Hello, Paula. It's so nice to see you again. Now, I'm going to mention off the top that I was on Paula's fabulous expat podcast recently. Tell us the exact name. Of course, I'm embarrassing myself by forgetting.
It's okay. It's Truly Expat Travel Podcast.
Okay. I was like, maybe I should cut that and start again. But this is real life, people. This is no smoke and mirrors. You're getting the real deal. Keltie forgetting her name some days. I was on her podcast recently, and I was just telling Paula how cool it was because it was all about my experience living in Munich, and we sort of did like a an audio guide to Munich, if you will, but like more the insider secrets. And so I just mentioned that it has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but I will include it in the show notes because if you want to check out Munich, if you're coming to visit at any point, you're going to want to check that out. And of course, you're going to want to check out Paula's fabulous podcast in general. But before we get into today's conversation about the kids or child-free decision and Paula's very interesting, adventurous life story, Paula, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we should know.
Thank you for having me on, Keltie. It's so nice to see you again. Yes, you were on my podcast and it was a great episode. But basically, my podcast is about interviewing expats about where they live, but from a tourist point of view, where to go, but kind of insider take on things. So yeah, it's a little different to a normal travel podcast. It's more about the expats and where they live and fun destinations.
Very cool. Okay. And so tell us, where are you living now? Is the podcast your business? What else do you do? Just give us a little bit of context for today's convo.
Yeah. So I literally, I just come back from the US, but before I was in the US, I moved from Singapore back to Hong Kong. So I've been in Asia 19 years and it's my 3rd time in Hong Kong.
Wow.
So I literally went there, unpacked for 5 days and I haven't been back since because I'm in Sydney at the moment visiting the kids who are older. They're in their 20s. I don't lock up kids when they're young and travel. They're in their 20s.
Can you imagine? You're like, they've been in the closet for the last 3 weeks. Yeah, we shouldn't joke. Some people do horrific things like that. Okay, they're grown-ups now. Sort of.
And so I've come to visit them. It's my son's birthday tomorrow. My baby turns 22. And then I head back to Hong Kong. I pretty much host women's groups for women over the age of 45 to amazing destinations. And I have a podcast, obviously. I have a website and I'm found on all socials.
Amazing. Okay, well, we will make sure we include all the places in the show notes and perhaps you can tell us a little bit more before we wrap up about where we can find you if people want to go on a fabulous trip with you. But let's talk about your kids or child-free decision. And you mentioned you are the mom to two children. Do you have?
3. I have 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I often go into these conversations totally blind. It's better that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And how old are your kids today?
Yeah, so I have my youngest will be 22 tomorrow. I have a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old. And if you include my husband, number 4, he's my 4th child.
I I'm sure people can appreciate the humor in that, and the truth in that at times.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't actually know. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that. I think I asked you, but I've forgotten. You're pretty young still for having such older children.
Yeah.
How old are you today?
52. So I had
Okay.
my first, I got married when I was 23.
Mm-hmm.
3 months later, I fell pregnant. So I had my first at 23, which is young, especially this day and age. And my husband's a bit younger, so I found out on his 21st birthday. So he's a really
Wow.
young dad. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, you mentioned this is your third stint living in Hong Kong. You've lived in other parts of Asia, but where were you when you became pregnant for the first time? Like, were you living in Australia then?
Yeah. So I had all 3 kids in Australia, and we didn't
Okay.
move overseas until my youngest was
Mhm.
2.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. And did you know you wanted to be a mom? Was this like a longstanding dream or vision of yours, or how did that and timing wise, like if the answer is yeah, I always knew that, then how did you know when you wanted to start your family?
I had a big plan. I wanted to have children by the age of 30. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted my first child at 30. I wanted my career to happen before I settled down. And I had my last at 30, so that didn't work out.
Okay.
I think what happened with us is that, things just happen. We had 3 very great surprises. I'm going to say good surprises. Uh, I hadn't planned any of them. Did I know I was going to be a mum? I always knew I was going to be a mum. I'm a much younger sibling to my older siblings have nieces. So my nieces and nephews are like closer to my age. So
Oh,
I've
okay.
always been around kids. Always loved kids, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want them straight away because I wanted to live my life. I wanted to travel.
Mm-hmm.
We'd just come back from backpacking. We did a year in Europe and then not a year. We did 1 year in Europe and then we did the next year in Asia. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I wanted to travel. So I really didn't want children then. I really wanted to start my family like when I was 30, when I was older.
Okay.
That just didn't happen like that.
Okay. And I'm guessing, I mean, once you were sort of in that whole world of having kids, it's like I'm guessing, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the change from no kids to 1 kid is probably more stark and severe, if you will, than going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3.
I
And yet,
actually
when those kids came in like relatively close succession, did that feel like, whoa, now I'm really in it?
Yeah. Do you know, the first was hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The first
Yeah.
I romanticized and I thought that I was going to be, pushing the pram in the park with all the other mums. I was going to have all these great opportunities to do all this stuff, but that child just cried and cried and cried. I don't think
Mm.
I slept for the first 4 years of his life, but the second child was completely different and she slept through the night in 2 weeks. So it really just depends on the child. Like, I think that every child's different, every situation's different. I think if I had had him last, I think I would have had more trouble. I think having him first, I just assumed every child was like that. So I just kind of wanted to get it out of the way and over and done with. But I realized he was just hard. The other 2 were
Yeah.
easy, like really easy.
Yeah. That's interesting only because I feel like a lot of people, they have the opposite experience. Like I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, the first child was pretty easy and not too much trouble," and then they think I'll have another and it's like the second child was like, "Oh, this is something else." So, I don't know if you've found that with other moms like having that, or would you say it's
Yeah.
more common that the first feels more difficult?
Yeah, I think most people would have, if they had felt the way I had, they probably wouldn't have had another one because he was so
Mm,
hard. But I just was young. I think because I was so young and naive and I didn't know any different, I just thought that's how life is supposed to be. And so I was very blessed because I had my parents with me. They came and lived with us for 7 years because dad wasn't well. But I was so blessed because my mum was amazing. Like, she helped me through that first one. I can't even explain.
yeah.
I remember coming home from the hospital and ringing her at 3 o'clock in the morning going, "Mum," this was before she moved in, "I don't know what to do. He just won't stop crying." And she goes, "Hold on, I'll be there in a minute." So she got in the car, came at 3 o'clock and said, "Go to bed." And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because you know what? She just taught me so much. And one thing is patience. And I didn't know I wanted to be a young mum, but I think I think my journey was meant to be a young mum because now, which I'll talk about in a minute, is
Yeah.
that this stage of life with the kids being young in their 20s and me still being old enough to hang out with them and go out with them, not go out like to clubs or anything, but just to,
Never know.
I'm not that mum, but I do like to hang out with them. You know, they're fun to be with at this stage. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's wonderful you had that support. And I think a lot of people, I mean, probably hearing that there's people listening. First of all, I would say that many of our listeners are probably going to be in their like maybe early, but probably more like mid late 30s. Like these are people who are thinking, okay, I'm just going to hopefully know someday. And wow, I really have to make a decision. And so they sadly may not have that benefit or perk of like younger parenthood. But I guess when I like, you know, putting myself, if I were still on the fence about this decision, thinking about, I just heard someone say that she had a kid who basically like wouldn't sleep for the first 4 years. And yet she had the benefit of having family support. They even live with her for the first 7 years of her kids' lives. Like, how would you, if somebody maybe doesn't have that support nearby and they're feeling daunted by the intensity of having a child, like, do you have any considerations they might make or perspectives that would be helpful if they're on the fence and thinking about doing this, but thinking, okay, I don't have the village and that sounds really full on. Like 4 years? Are you kidding me?
I think if I was older, I think the benefit of being older is that you kind of have the patience. I think at 23, not knowing what I was doing, I was still a baby. Like I felt like I was still a baby. And so I think if it'd been years later, I had no help, it would have been fine. When I moved overseas and my little one was 2, I did it all on my own. Like I'm talking no support. Like that's miles and miles away. So it's doable. It's easy. It's easier as it goes by because then you kind of go, yeah, I got this. I know what I'm doing. Kids are great. You know, they are. They're as much as that 4 years was tough, every other year was fine after that. You know, 4 years is not, and when I say I didn't sleep for 4 years, that's because I had so many kids. It's not, he wasn't just the reason that I was awake all the time, you know, having newborns is tiring. But then I had a baby that slept through the night in 2 weeks. So it just depends, you know, it's only as hard as you make it, I think, because I think if you stress, the baby stresses. And I think at 23, I was stressed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was doing. So I think that didn't help. And plus he had silent reflux. So
that's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. And it made it harder because he then thought it would be a great idea to start crawling at 4.5 months and then walking at 8 months. Yeah.
No.
And he's a baby that didn't know what he was just running, like run. So, and as a mom, like as a 23-year-old, I'm like, yeah, he can run. Oh, wow, look at my baby. But really, the next baby I kept pushing down. Don't stand, don't walk. Because it's hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
But I think that if you have boundaries, if you have schedules, which babies love schedules. However, in saying that, my biggest so when we moved overseas, the reason we moved overseas is because my husband always said that he always remembered I'd always wanted to move overseas, and we had babies. So we had an opportunity when I fell pregnant the first time, the second time, and so we said no because I fell pregnant. And then he was like, well, let's go for 6 months. Let's just go for 6 months and see how it goes. That was 19 years ago and we're still traveling.
Wow.
So I think you can move away with children and you can travel with children. In fact, I loved when they were little and traveled. Like I traveled because I'm a big kid. I love Disneyland. I love doing stuff like that. So I think if you allow kids to travel with you, it's fine. It is fine.
Yeah. Now, okay, this is a good question. Like you mentioned your husband, I remember that you said, you know, I want to travel, that you wanted to live somewhere else specifically, but that was the desire. And that said, you've got your parents living with you. You mentioned, I think your father was unwell also. So you've got the family support, obviously also things going on with family that probably I can imagine there was also a pull to stay. Like, how did you decide then with 3 kids, okay, we're going to uproot our lives and you moved to Taiwan was the first place you moved to?
Yeah.
And then why Taiwan? Like, tell me about how you navigated all that. And was that a hard decision to make? Or were you like, yeah, absolutely, let's go try it for 6 months?
I think firstly, mum and dad had decided that it was too much having the 3 little kids around all the time. So they moved out. They moved out. And we were only going 6 months. Unfortunately for me, I was gone 3 weeks and my dad passed away. And so, it's just timing. And I had put it off so much because he was ill that there was never a right time. So when we left and we went to Taiwan, it was only going to be 6 months anyway. So I was like, this is just a vacation for me because then I didn't have to work for 6 months, but obviously not for my husband. We went for my husband's work. And to be brutally honest, it was back in the days where there was just MySpace. There wasn't any other Facebook. There was nothing like that. So I thought we were going to somewhere like Thailand and I was going to be drinking mojitos on the beach, but it was definitely like that. It was more like China and it was hard and it was really hard. Like no one spoke English. There was no internet. I had taxi cards for all the Chinese symbols just to get me from A to B. That was probably harder than having the children, moving the first time. You know.
Wow.
But you just does it. You just do it, you know.
I think your attitude's amazing. I agree with you. I mean, but yeah, so first of all, you're not talking about moving from Australia to the UK or Canada. You know, you're moving to a foreign country. Had you ever been to Taiwan before?
Nope.
And did you say, so your husband, did he get a job there? Was it a transfer? Like, okay. And did it come up first or were you guys like, oh, we want to go somewhere. Let's see if we can find a place to go.
I think he was approached. Yeah, I think he was approached at work and then he come home and said, they're offering me a 6-month transfer for this project. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't even think about it. I didn't even know where it was. I was like, yep, sure, let's do it. Let's 6 months. Let's have the adventure. The kids will go to a new school just for 6 months. And we'll see how it goes. They went to an European school. So they went to Taipei European School. They spoke English. I had a taxi driver who spoke English and he would pick me up every day. He was so sweet. He was born in Taiwan, but he lived in Canada for a long time. So he wanted to teach me Mandarin. So we'd get in the car and he wouldn't let me speak English. So that was fun. The whole experience was fun. I knew it wasn't going to be forever. So I just embraced it.
And so where did he take you? He took you to school with the kids? Is that...
Yeah. He took me anywhere else I wanted to go. So I had his phone number and every time I needed to go somewhere, I just called him and he was at my door. In fact, when I was sick when my kids were sick one day, I rang him and said, I've got to go pick up my daughter. He stayed and he went to McDonald's, took my daughter to McDonald's while I took my son to the doctor's. He was so honestly, it was like they were calling him Uncle Johnny because he was so lovely.
Are you still in touch with him by chance?
Unfortunately, no. It was just too hard back then because I think I might have had I did have a mobile phone, but it was a flip top. So it wasn't, I might have had an email. That's about it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering, like, I'm guessing with the European school, maybe there was a way to kind of get tapped into the community there through your husband's work, but like, how did you meet people and establish a network? And did you have support? Like, did you have nannies or babysitters? I mean, I'm guessing not all the kids were in school because it sounds like your youngest was still pretty little.
He was in preschool, so he went like 2 or 3 days a week, just in the like half a day, but the other 2 are at school. I think the best thing to do when you move is have children. Because it opens up to a network that you never would have had at your doorstep. And so everyone there spoke English because everyone at the school spoke English. And that was my outlet because from there I met some friends. Actually, those friends are today still my friends. You know, I lived in a few different places where they have been over the years. So I've been blessed to be able to. And it's interesting now because now every time I move, I don't have the children as my gateway to new people to meet. Now I have to actually be an adult and meet people on my own, which is quite hard. It's actually harder than having children.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth in what you say about having kids. And this is appealing for people who are on the fence, not all of them, but some of them, this idea of like, they understand that they'll become more sort of hooked into and enmeshed in community and have that connection and sort of built in friendships or social circles, which, you know, they can be downsized depending how much you maybe connect with those people. But it sounds like, especially to move to a new country, if you already have had children or if you have children there, I do think it's probably a great opportunity to like create those connections and lay the foundations for your life. So
definitely.
Okay. What happened after 6 months? Why did you not move back?
I did move back after 6 months. I was there. Okay. Yeah, I was home for a month, and then my husband said, "Do you know what? There's an offer in Hong Kong. Do we want to go again?" And I was like, "Oh, we're still renovating this house. What about you go? And I'll come once the kids finish their school year, because in Australia we finish in December." And so I said, "Let me finish the school year with the kids. I'll finish the renovations and I'll come and I'll meet you in Hong Kong." And that's what we did. We left on the 1st of January. So January of 2027, 28, I think it is. I don't know.
Not 2028.
2008, I think. 2007. I don't even know what year it was, but
You're in the future.
Yeah, I'm in the future.
2 years from now. I took my little kids. Okay, and sorry, you went to Hong Kong next.
Yeah, so we spent 3 years in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is a big chunk of the kids' lives, because 3 years in the kids' life is a long time.
Yeah.
So we spent 3 years in Hong Kong with the kids. Loved it. I mean, back then it's still a really great place to live, but back then we lived on an island, so they would go off with their friends, and it was a small island, so you could go to the neighbor's place and it's not an issue. You can walk from school. It was everyone just had golf carts. We didn't have cars, so it was super safe. And it was like a bit of an island paradise. And because of that, you know yourself as an expat, you tend to gravitate towards people with like-minded kind of same kind of values as you, same kind of you also hook onto friendships very quickly, and all of a sudden they become family, as opposed to, which you wouldn't do normally in your own environment. Like, I wouldn't hang out with people like necessarily some of the people that I met and hung out with, just because you just don't in your own country. We don't in Australia anyway. And so they became family. And they still are. That group of friends that I had there are probably, you know, I still see them. They're all around the world, but I still see them today. So it's quite special.
I wanted to actually ask you about this idea of found family. And what I'm hearing is there's perhaps some greater ease to doing that if you are living in another country, and it's sort of like you're almost forced to do that. But I guess I think it's something that all of us could do more of, right? It's wonderful to have our own, genetic or in terms of in-laws, like familial relations. There's also can be downsides to that as well. Of course, you don't get to choose them, generally speaking. But I think found family is something that's really important. And yet a lot of people say to me, like, I don't know how to cultivate that. Like, how do you create family-like relationships? And so do you have any tips for how we can do that or think about it? Like, do you feel like you had to be intentional about that, or is it just something that naturally happened? I'm curious your thoughts.
I think it naturally happens, but I think as expats, you've got a different life mindset, because we know that we are family. There's no other family there. So if Christmas time, if we were in Hong Kong at Christmas time, for example, someone would just say, "I'm put my hand up. Let's have an orphans Christmas where you just have everybody in," and the kids all grew up together. They're more like cousins than they are friends. Even to this day, like, we have them stay over here in Sydney quite often, and my kids will go over there quite often, whether it's a UK or there's still some in Hong Kong. It's not intentional, but it just happens. You just feel close to people a little bit. You're a little bit more open to being friends with people rather than at home. You're less guarded. You're more open to being a bit more vulnerable. I guess that's because we all get homesick. We all have our ups and downs, and we always need someone to be able to knock on the door and have a glass of wine with. I do anyway.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'll be there. I'm interested what people back home thought of you taking your 3 young children, leaving the place you knew and deciding to, in sequential order, okay, Taiwan, then Hong Kong. Like, were people like, that's so cool, I wish I could do that, but I couldn't? Or were there naysayers saying like, well, are you sure that's going to be good to for your kids? I'm just curious how people sort of regarded that big change.
I think going to Hong Kong and Taiwan were fine. Like everyone was like, that's a great adventure. That's so cool, blah, blah, blah. The issue came when, firstly, I'm half Italian, right? So we stay with our family forever. Sending my kids to boarding school in Australia, in another country, well, that's a whole new thing. I was labeled selfish. I was labeled,
Okay.
it's so, I can't even tell you how many names I got called because people thought I was by everybody, not everybody, by lots of people that didn't understand why we send our kids to boarding school.
Okay. So when did that start? Walk us backwards. When did you make that decision and why did you choose to do that rather than having them in the school system where you were based?
Firstly, I didn't make the decision. Secondly, it was my eldest that made the decision.
Okay.
So he went to New Zealand for a rugby academy, and the guy there said, you cannot live in Hong Kong if you want to, because by that stage, we'd come back to Hong Kong. That was our second time in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And so he would have been 14, I think. And he said, if you want rugby as your career, you need to go home to Australia. You can't be living in Hong Kong. And so he did. That's what he wanted to do. So we went to all the schools ourselves, the two of us, my son and I, and he chose which school he wanted to go to, because I thought if he wanted to do this badly, then he needs to choose a school that he wants to, feels most happy in.
Yeah.
And he chose a rugby school that he loved, absolutely loved. And then my daughter didn't want to, when we were moving from Hong Kong to Malaysia, she said, I don't want to move again. Can you promise me I can finish all the schooling there? And I'm like, I can't. That's Dad's job. I can't promise anything. So she said, I want to go home as well. So she then left that following year.
When she was 13 then? Like, was it at the same?
The following year. So she left. So she left after. She went to school earlier than him in boarding school, but she left the year after him.
Yeah.
And then my youngest begged us to let him go because he missed the others.
Aww.
And he really missed them, and he didn't love Malaysia. I have to admit, he didn't. I think he didn't love Malaysia because it was just different. It was a bit more difficult for him to do the sports that he loved, and then he had some surgery, he had some medical issues, so he really wanted to go home, and he went like 2 years after, and so by the time Rylan was in year 7, which I'm just thinking, gosh, I'm feeling old now, was 10
Maybe
years
13
ago
or so.
So he was 12. It's awful. I didn't want him to go, but so I spent a lot of time in Australia back then because I was doing 2 weeks in Australia, 2 weeks in Malaysia at that stage.
Okay.
And then we moved to Singapore. By the time we moved to Singapore, Rylan, I think the 2 youngest were still at school, and then Kiara finished a year after we were at school. So Rylan was at school on his own for 4 years, and that was through COVID, and that was a whole another different ball game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And were they all at the same school as each other? No.
Nope. So my eldest had finished by the time my youngest had started. So they're 2 boys. They would have gone to the same school. And then my daughter was at a different school because it's an all-girls school.
Okay.
So, but they were close. They were not far from each other.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you mentioned your youngest missed his other siblings, and so they were able to like see each other
every weekend.
Every weekend. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was something they coordinated themselves, or it was how does that work? I've never. I didn't go to boarding school. I've just read books and seen movies about it.
So because my eldest was 18 and driving, he was able to pick him up and take him. So he'd go and watch his rugby on a Saturday, but then he'd also be playing. So if he was playing on a Saturday, he couldn't, but if he'd watch him play and then he'd pick him up. He was coaching at the school as well at that stage.
Okay.
So they coordinated. I think my daughter would often catch the bus or train or whatever and meet the boys. So they coordinated. Most weekends they would be together, which if I wasn't there to pick her up, then my son was there. So
okay. And for how long or what period of that time were you doing the 2 weeks in Asia, 2 weeks in Australia? And my God, how did you manage that? Because like that must be a pretty big trip still.
Not too. It's just a night flight, so 7 hours. So
Yeah, well,
yeah. Well, some of the parents were driving 10, 12 hours because they were country kids coming to visit them at school. So when I put it into perspective like that, it's an overnight sleep and it's fine. So I did that for like, I want to say continuously for about 4 years. And then when COVID hit, I got stuck in Australia. So I was there for 6 months the first year and then 7 months the second year. And then by that time, Rylan had finished and now I'm a full-time. I used to call myself a part-time empty nester, but now I'm a full-time empty nester because now we don't have any kids at stay home at all.
Wow. And your husband was like the two of you were separated then for those 6 months and 7 months during COVID? That must have been really tough. And obviously him from the kids especially and you.
Yeah. It was awful because I felt for him. He was stuck on his own, right? Like he was the one missing out on all of us. As much as they were driving me crazy, we were also having a lot of fun, getting to know each other again because we spent, it's as much as we still see each other and speak to each other every day, it's still not the same as being under one roof. And we all got really close, which was quite nice. I think Troy did come over for Christmas. He was able to, but then he had to quarantine. There was a whole lot of things that happened. And then when I went back, Rylan had finished by then, and then I was in Singapore pretty much all the time, and I'd come back, not as much, not as regular, maybe every 2 months.
All right, this is the part of the podcast episode where I am going to share one of your Apple Podcast reviews. Now, before I do that, allow me to share the reminder that if you are wanting to support this podcast, if this podcast has impacted and helped you in some way, the best thing that you can do is to leave a rating and or a review in either Apple Podcasts or the Spotify app. So today we have a review from Gabera Verde 17. I hope I got that right. It's titled, "You're Not Alone, 5 out of 5 stars. They write, "I wish I had found this podcast years ago when I started trying to figure out whether I wanted kids. In our culture, it's uncommon to find honest and diverse testimonies of people who decided to have kids and people who are child-free. In this podcast, there are so many stories worth listening to. And while one learns that others share some of one's experiences, one also gets to understand and gain a deep appreciation for those who pursue different paths. I honestly recommend this podcast also to people who already have children and just to everyone. It's that good." Wow, thank you so much for those kind words. And I really appreciate you sharing this podcast with the parents in your life as well. I think one of the best ways that we can bridge connection and create more understanding is to listen to the stories of people who have chosen other life paths than us. So thank you so much for that review, Gabera Verde 17. And for all of you who have taken the time to leave ratings and or reviews, again, if you have not had the chance to do that, hit pause right now, go into the app that you're listening to this on, and you can either leave a star rating or in the case of Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a few kind words. And who knows, maybe I will read out your review in the next episode of the podcast. I'm interested for you, it sounds like this was initiated by the kids, but like, was there any sort of either internal push and pull to say like, do we actually do this and let the kids go? You mentioned it wouldn't have been feasible with your husband's work to necessarily relocate, but like, was there a consideration do we all move there? Like, and were the kids, was there ever any resentment or like I'm just curious kind of the dynamic of that all. I realize that's, first of all, those are several questions and it's a big topic, but I'm wondering if you can just speak to what that was like for you.
It was probably the hardest thing ever. Like, honestly, this sounds really awful and morbid, but I'd walk into the kids' rooms like they'd passed away and sit in the bed and cry because it was so sad to know that I'd let them go, especially if they'd ring up and they had a bad day. Like, they'd ring up, they'd have a bad day, have a cry. I'd hang up the phone, I'd have a cry, and then you ring them the next day, I'd still be upset, and they'd go, "What? I'm okay." I'm like, okay. And every time I drop them off, I'd have a cry on the way to the airport. But it's a tough one. And when people say that you're selfish for sending your child to boarding school, I think it's actually the complete opposite. Because I think I had to be selfless because that's what they needed and that's what I wanted, and that was a better education for them. There was no chance that my husband he didn't have a job to go to, which meant that we wouldn't be able, it wouldn't have worked, because if we had have all moved back, which at one stage my husband really wanted to because he missed the kids, because I could come and go. He couldn't, so he was really missing them, and he really at one stage really, really, really wanted to come back. But there's just no jobs in his industry for him in Australia. So we had to stay overseas.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'm curious for you professionally, were you working during this time? And if so, what was the work you were able to do that had like that kind of flexibility to go back and forth?
So I gave up work for 5 years. I decided that if my husband was working traveling all the time, one of us had to be home. And so I decided to step back and not let him, that's not the right word. We had discussed, and he was the person that needed to go. We were there for him. And so I wanted to stay home and be a mum. And I did for 5 years. And so when I was going back and forwards, I wasn't working. Yeah. And then when Rylan went and then I had time to myself, I started blogging. And it was a hobby that turned into a full-time business. So, yeah, that's how I started what I'm doing.
Wow. Okay. And prior to those 5 years, like, had you been in a particular industry, or what types of work had you done then?
I used to teach. Like, I was an adult educator. So used to teach people, obviously, when they're older, diplomas and in business and human resources. I couldn't think of the word there. It was so long ago. That is my background is HR. So I worked in HR, then I taught HR, strategic human resource management, business management. And then I started a business with someone in Hong Kong, which is a women's networking organization. And then when I left Hong Kong, I realized I really needed to be mum. And so that's what I did.
Okay. I'm curious to hear, what do you think is or was the best part of raising kids in a foreign country, and what's been or was the most challenging part of that?
The best part is now the kids have friends all around the world, which I think is amazing. The best part at the time also is that I think they're a little more worldly, a little bit more accepting, is that the word? Yeah, accepting.
Yeah, have greater acceptance, yeah.
To different cultures and languages and people and races. I do believe that as children they were a lot more tolerable in terms of understanding different cultures and really, really wanted to know what people were like. And they never judged someone for where they came from. It was more about who the person is and what culture you can bring to the table. And that used to actually excite them, the completely opposite to what I was like or children were like when I was growing up. So I think that was definitely a bonus. Plus we traveled so much. I also believe that every place that we lived, we had to volunteer because I wanted to give back to the country because they accepted us for being there. So their kids did so much. They fed the homeless in Korea. They they did some work with the orphans in Japan. So I just think that was a thing they probably wouldn't have been able to do if they were living in Australia.
Yeah.
I forgot the second question. The first question was
the hardest part or parts.
Okay. The hardest part was not having family there. By far, you miss out on so much when you're away. You miss out on the birthdays and you miss out on the hard times, the good times, and you see and the kids missed growing up with their cousins, which I really. At the time, I was really disappointed. Like I just used to see all the other cousins together and stuff like that. But as the years have gone by, in fact, because we used to go home all the time, and because we used to stay in contact with, video calls and stuff like that, they're actually really close to their cousins. They're so close that they're all going away to Europe soon, actually.
Oh, fun. All the cousins?
Well, there's two lots of two lots. So
Okay. Yeah.
8 of them are going together, my kids and the ones that are similar ages. We're all meeting in Italy because it would have been my dad's 100th birthday.
Wow.
So we're all meeting in Italy. So the older cousins, we're all, like all of us, sisters, brothers, all of us. So yes, we're all meeting somewhere, somehow, and then getting to Italy.
Yeah. Such cool experiences for them.
Mm.
I'm curious about this, and I had to remember a conversation I overheard last year when I was in Croatia, and it was a young couple. They were American, and I'm trying to remember if they had a child with them or if they were talking about their, prospective children. But the conversation was basically like, how do we, by giving our kids experiences like going to this lovely little island in Croatia, essentially like sort of check our kids' privilege? Because that is obviously something that a lot of people don't get to experience. And for parents who love traveling and who have the financial means and also just have prioritized giving their kids the experience of visiting and living in and whatever other places, like, do you think, or did you consider that there was maybe a risk of like them not having, I guess, how did you instill the kind of recognition that like not everybody is going to necessarily be living in all these countries and having a driver and going to boarding school? You mentioned the volunteering, for example, but like, is that something that you've had to be mindful of? And if so, how have you tried to do that?
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's definitely a hard one because even living in the expat world, it's not reality. It's not real. It's not real. I had a helper. I'll be honest. I had a helper. I still have a helper. She's a big part of the family. I think for me, instilling values, the value of, firstly being humble. Secondly, the helper is not a part. She doesn't work for you. She's a part of the family, and you still need to make your bed in the morning. You still need to, do your chores. You don't get a free ride. I think appreciating what you have and realizing, and one thing is working for that. I remember my son, the funniest thing ever, he decided that he wanted to make money. So I said, okay, what we will do is that there were, back in the day when you had a leaflet. So one of my the business I had in Hong Kong, some of the women at the networking place would have businesses and they wanted leaflets. And I said, my son will do that. So I took him out one day and he said, oh, can my friend come? I said, okay. So they were handing out leaflets. I was driving them. I helped them. I gave them lunch. And at the end of the day, I handed out like a quarter of what he was supposed to get. And he's like, where's the money? And I was like, okay, so my petrol money, my time, your friend's time, you need to pay him, and your lunch. So that's reality. Nothing's a free ride. And very quickly he realized how hard life is because, things don't get handed out. And it's just little lessons along the way, right? It's yes, you're very lucky to be able to do these things and get these things. It doesn't mean that I think if they understand that not everybody can do this, and as soon as they can, making some money for themselves is a huge thing because then they can understand what the value of the dollar is. And I think that's, I think the unfortunate thing as an expat, you can't get children to work. They can't actually, they're not allowed to work. Whereas in Australia, yeah, because and at boarding school too, you're not allowed to work. And so that makes it even harder because I know I learned quite a lot of things when I worked for the first time. I think in Australia you can be 14. I think it's 14.
I think it's similar in Canada, yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you're not allowed to do that, then how are you going to learn? So if you can do things around the house, then that makes a difference. And if you can do things like what I did with my son, I think just making sure that they understand that. One thing I didn't agree with, it's each to their own, but one thing I don't agree with, or from my family anyway, is that just because I'm just going to say Ben or Joe, got the latest iPhone doesn't mean you get the latest iPhone. There was a certain age where they were allowed to have an iPhone. Very different back then, I guess, because now smartphones everywhere. But just because Joe's getting something or Joe's going somewhere doesn't mean my child's going to, because I'm different. Apparently I was the strictest mum ever. I was told tonight, actually.
It's funny. My parents were also, I think, I would say quite strict. And the in their case or in my case, like I think some of the worry that lived alongside that is in my view excessive. And yet overall, I'm kind of like, I don't know. It seemed to have also worked out okay. But yeah, it's hard when you feel like you're the only kid whose parents don't allow you to have something or go somewhere or do something. Yeah. But it sounds like you've been able to like try and just abide by or like align with those values as best you can, even if your kids didn't always like it, I'm sure.
They definitely didn't like it. I remember
Still don't sometimes.
No, I remember when we moved to Japan, my son was like, everybody is going. He was like, I don't know, maybe 14, maybe 13. And he said, everybody's going to Roppongi. Everyone, I think there was a curfew at 10 o'clock by Japan standards. The kids had to go. And I'm like, you know what? Sorry, you're my training wheels. I've never had a child that's 12 before. So whatever, I'm going to make mistakes, but I don't know any better. And I'm not going to send you off into a street in Japan when we've just moved there. Like, what mother would do that? Probably lots of mothers, but not me. So, so therefore, I think quite often you do have worries because you remember. I feel like I remember what I was like as a child, and I was naughty.
Am I allowed to say I'm not super surprised? I can see that. Oh, that's funny. I think you and I can't remember if we talked about this at the beginning of this conversation or before you and I even started recording, but like a lot of the discourse around this kids or child-free decision seems to really be centered on like the infant stages and the toddler stages, or the really long view of like someday when I'm 75 and my kids are at my birthday party. And like, I think we miss a lot of that middle time, if you will, and stages of having and raising children. And so I'm curious for you, like, would you say you've had a favorite stage of having and raising your kids? And if so, like, what is that and why has it been your favorite?
I think I know what phase was not my favorite.
Tell us.
I think the teenage years is hard. It's so hard because you think yourself, I know as a teenager, I struggled. Like I thought nobody understood me, and you've got hormones, you've got so much going on that I think they're the hardest years. And as an adult, as a parent, they're also the hardest years because one minute they're fantastic, lovely children, the next minute they're awful, and they're awful to each other. They're fighting with me, or I think that phase was difficult, like really difficult. But the little kids, when they were little, was so much fun. Yeah. And when they were now, they're so much fun. Like I love that stage. And I quite often miss, in fact, you know what? Even the teenage years, they were hard, but they were rewarding because all of a sudden you saw stages in their life, right? All of a sudden they get things, or they're a little bit more mature, or the first time they go out, or the first time they ride a bike, or I don't know, drive a car. That was freaky. But I think all stages have bonus points. I think for me, I mourn a little bit of each of what was, but now I love it. I love the fact that for my daughter's graduation, we went to the Maldives together. Or
wow.
I went over, my son he's just moved back from Sydney, from Ireland back to Sydney. But when he was in Ireland, I went over and visited him and his girlfriend. Like, I love that stage, I love that we can be adults and have adult conversations. In fact, I learn a lot. I can ask them for advice now, which is really nice, you know?
Yeah, that's so cool. Oh, yeah, I think, as much as I didn't have enough desire to have kids, I can say that like having the relationship with the adult children is something that really like holds some appeal. And it's something that I haven't really enjoyed myself. Specifically, I feel like in my early 20s, I just remember like finding it so cool to be able to be on this sort of like level footing with my parents, if you will, in terms of like going out for drinks together or like traveling, having an experience. It's so cool. Okay. I'm interested. So all your kids are in their 20s now, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if maybe we're like immune to this to a degree, but like what's it been like even in the last several years, like having adult children and having to navigate some of these like big sort of heavy life topics, like, I don't know, mental health, AI, climate change, like would you say the problems feel like they've gotten bigger? Do you feel like them being and I understand they moved back to Australia for boarding school, but like having been like expat kids and having lived elsewhere, did it make them immune to some of those challenges? Or is it kind of like, well, no, they're teenagers, so it's, or now young adults, that's just part of going through life?
I think this stage is probably harder in a lot of ways, and I don't know if that's every parent, but for me, living so far away, if someone rings me in the midnight saying, "You're so far away, right?" That's why I always say to my husband, I can live anywhere as long as it's just one plane ride away from my kids. That way, if someone needs me, I can. Like my son had a emergency appendicitis. So I was on the next plane and I was there in the morning, and it's harder as they're older because the problems are deeper. Before when they're little, it's like, oh, I don't know, Sarah won't play with me. And it's sad for them, but it's not so deep. Now it is bigger issues. But I think if you have that communication with the kids, I think that if you allow the kids to know that this is a safe space, I will never judge you for what you have to say. They're your feelings and you have every right to feel that way. And the doors are always open. If you are ever stuck, if you ever need anything, you know that, and they know that mum and dad will be there no matter what, and will never judge, And I think that's the problem, not the problem. I think growing up for me, having an Italian father and very, very strict Italian father, there wasn't any of that communication. It was like, you do this and this is the way we're supposed to do. We don't talk about things. Whereas I am completely opposite. I'm like, my door's always open. Whatever, I don't ever want you feel scared to tell me that you've done something or that you feel a certain way. So it is harder when they're older, but as long as I always say that you need to fight for the relationship, because when they're in their teens, they do pull away. They will pull away, and that's normal, But you got to fight for it, You got to fight, and you got them to understand that this is never going to go away. I'm always going to be here, regardless of if you want it or not. I'm always going to be the person that loves you the most,
Yeah.
Maybe down the track when they've got a partner and it's different, but I'm always going to be that person no matter what that will be there for you.
Wow. You sound like a wonderful mom.
Oh, my kids might not think that way.
Well, you tell them Keltie said so. I'm interested to hear a little bit about like meaning and purpose and how it intersects with this role of mother, our mom, because you're as you mentioned, like a relatively young empty nester. You were a part-time empty nester, now a full-time, and I know, and I'd be curious for you, your relationship with purpose and meaning and having kids, but like that can give a lot of meaning and purpose to people's lives, and yet now your meaning or purpose, we could argue in some ways, like has gone elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested in like how that maybe has evolved, and even your identity as a mom with your kids not being physically present day to day anymore.
That is hard. I think that transition from being mum, like full-time mum, to an empty nester is you lose your identity. You're always going to be mum, but you lose that part of you. It's almost like I remember at the time saying to my husband, I feel like I got fired from my job. I know my identity is mum and this is the position that I've always held, but all of a sudden I don't have that job anymore. I don't need to ring no one needs to ring me to ask me if they can go somewhere. The school's not asking me this, that, and the other. I'm not on someone's back about not doing their homework. All of a sudden they don't need me to pick them up from anywhere. Where do I fit in? And that transition for me was hard, from that 18-year-old, like 17 to 18-year-old, that transition was hard for me and I needed to figure it out. So I spent a whole year kind of trying to work it out actually. And a lot of people I know are in the same boat, and which is why I started doing what I'm doing, right? For the first time ever, I'm like, I'm allowed to think about me first. I'd never had that. It's never been a thing for me. It's always been the kids always come first. And so when I started doing these tours, I realized there's so many women in that boat, that we're all like in that transition period of like, the kids don't really want to go out and travel with you anymore because, maybe once a year, but not all the time. No school holidays. You don't need to do any of that anymore. And it's like, well, I'm a bit lost, husband's working, you're at home. So that's hard. That transition, I think, is probably the hardest that you'll ever go through, just because it's different when the first and second go through, but when the third goes through and then there's no more kids, it's like, well, where do I fit in? And it was tough for me for a year. And the kids, I would say to the kids, you haven't rung me today. But we called you yesterday, Mum. I know, but I haven't heard you from. And then I realized, you know what? It's me that needs it, not them. And so I backed off, started traveling, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I get a call and I go, yeah, I'm doing okay because they're still calling,
Yeah. I'm interested in that year where you were doing sort of this exploration and like coming to terms with this new identity. Like, were there particular questions you asked yourself or like things that you were seeking? Like, I'm interested what that sort of inner monologue, dialogue, if you will, look like. Like, were you thinking, what is my purpose now? Or like, what do I enjoy? Like, what did that sort of look like?
I was asking all those questions and more. I was like, well, I threw myself into my work, which helped, because then all of a sudden I'm pretty lucky because I still had an identity, which was, the content creator, the blogger. Like I was still continuing that when the kids were at school. Whereas I know a lot of friends didn't have that. So that outlet was like, who am I? What am I? So I think the transition for me was difficult, but not as hard as it could have been, because I threw myself into work. But I'm like, well, where do I fit in and how do I fit in? Because I want to give them their space, but I also want to be there. So I'm like, that's why I stopped coming home every 2 weeks. That's why I stopped going home all the time, because they needed to them figure out who they were, And so that's why I was going back every couple of months, just to be able to, and spending a whole month with them and still speaking all the time, still conversing, and then realizing, okay, this is actually okay. They can go off and do their own thing, come to me when they need me, but I don't need to be there 24/7. They're young adults now. They can work things out together on their own, and they've got each other. It's not like they're on their own. The three of them are under one roof. They've got each other.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that makes it easier.
Yeah, I bet. You mentioned you host travel with, it's exclusively women, is it?
Yeah.
These trips that you do?
Yeah.
Okay. And are most of them moms? Are they all moms? Are they all empty nesters? Like where are they sort of, what's their background?
That's interesting questions. They're probably about 90% mothers.
Yeah.
There's still got 10% that have never been married or don't have children.
Yeah.
For whatever choice that they've decided. But generally speaking, most are in that transition of, well, what about me? What am I doing? And all of a sudden having this list of life, I've got like so I have a little WhatsApp group. So there's about 60 of us. Okay. And I'm like, where do we want to go? And I'll make it happen. And so it's actually fun, like, because then they've looked after their kids for so long, it's time for them to look after themselves. And I'm here to help them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, I'm curious. I'm always, I find it interesting. Sidebar story, but I was having a facial when I was in Vancouver recently, and the esthetician, she said she has, I think, 2 or if not 3 older children. But what she was saying to me when I told her what I do for work, she said, "Oh, that's really interesting," because what I appreciated is that people and women in particular who work with women and who are in sort of like that position of being a listening ear, they see and hear a lot of things that we might not necessarily see in like just our friendships or among family or what have you. And she said to me, I have a lot of women who are getting a facial or getting their nails done or whatever, who are telling me about, I don't know if I want to have kids, or I wish that I had a partner that I could have children with, and like sort of like the angst tied up in that. And I was like, oh, interesting. There could be some insights there for me in the coaching work that I do to hear like what is on, women's minds. And so I'm interested for you, like, what are you seeing and hearing from the women that you are traveling with, in particular as it relates to, let's say, their kids, their relationship with their kids, if they're mothers, for those who haven't had kids, like, things like meaning, regret, like what the future looks like. Like, I know those are like, that's maybe not super well articulated. That's a lot of questions there. But like, are there any through lines or themes that you're hearing or seeing, or anything interesting that you can kind of even anecdotally relate to us?
I think most of the people or most women on the group the tours seem to be in the same position of they're either very close to their mother or they're very close to their kids. So I
Okay.
do believe that the same relationships and same problems come from either side,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, whether it's not hearing from them enough, whether it's hearing from them too much, whether it's,
Mhm.
them asking for money or them not asking for anything and going off on their own. I think it's such a broad. It's actually, I think it doesn't really matter if you're the mother or if you're the child. It seems to be the same. The same problems go back and forwards through
Mm,
generations, if that makes sense.
mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I do think we all complain that our kids, you know, aren't calling us enough or they're probably not doing the things that we would like them to do. But as a
Mm.
mother, all you can do is sit and support. You can't sit and I would love to be able to I would love to be in their shoes again and do it all again because
Yeah.
in hindsight, you think you know more, but you don't. At the end of the day, they need to they need to
You're
go off
like,
and
"You
do
know
their
nothing, but I guess you have to figure it out yourself."
exactly, exactly. So I think
Uh,
there's no real theme, if that makes sense. It just seems to be the same problems or the same situations that happen generation after generation.
yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of solace in, like, these women coming together to, like, connect both on the topic of, family and children, but of course, all kinds of other things as well.
I think we
Yeah.
don't really talk about kids as much. It's now that you
Interesting. Yeah.
say it, I think it's
Yeah.
a release of just going out and having a good time because we
Yeah.
don't we're always talking about kids. And I'm also
Yeah,
very
good point.
mindful if I've got people around that don't have children, I'm very
Mhm.
mindful not to talk about my own.
Oh,
Just
interesting. Tell me more about that.
just about out of respect for them, right? Because who
Okay.
wants to hear about my kids all the time? Like, I know I don't, you know? I'm mindful of talking about like other subjects. There's a lot more to me than my children don't just identify. I'm not identified just by my children. That's what I meant to say. There's a lot of other things about me that I can connect with, whether it's travel, whether it's your work, whether it's sports. I love sports, hobbies, anything. So I'm very mindful not to talk about children, especially when my kids were little, you know, because you can be wrapped up in that world where all you're talking about is nappies and bottles and my daughter said hello today or if you don't have children, do you really want to do you really
Yeah.
want to be hanging out with me?
Yeah. It's I'm sure that's appreciated. And my guess is, like, would you say for you personally, have you had uh, you mentioned meeting a lot of friends through your kids or through, having children, but would you say you also have friendships with people without children? Is
Oh
that
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
In fact, my first friend in Taiwan didn't have children.
Okay.
And so she would hang out with us but we would talk about everything else besides the kids that were running around, um, because I do appreciate people that choose not to as well because I'm really interested in what they've got to do, what they're doing. Like I've got loads of friends that have never had children,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I like hanging out with them. I actually, yeah, because I think I can appreciate when we're younger that all we
Mhm.
want to do is talk about the kids because that's all our life is. And it's funny now that my nieces and nephews are at that age where they've got little ones and all they do is talk about their little ones. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad. I'm glad I didn't talk all the time about the kids.
Yeah. I think, I am very happy to talk to my mom friends about their children. And also, I want to connect on other things as well, right? I think it's so important that we, like, share and have these other values. And likewise, I find it hurtful, really, if, I've had this experience with some friends and acquaintances of mine where there seems to be no interest in my own life, I think, because I don't have
Mm,
children. And I think,
yeah.
like, yes, it's a big life choice, but are we really so different if one of us chooses to have kids and one not? If,
Yeah.
like you say, we share other common interests and values and hobbies and we travel, like, why can't we talk about all those other things? Like, I'm not an alien because I don't have kids. So
Yeah.
I love that you, um, value all of those other things in your life. I'm guessing that's part of what's made you have, like, a really interesting, robust, interesting life. But it's also probably meant a lot for your relationships that you've taken that perspective. So,
well, I think you have plenty of time to talk about pureeing vegetables and, the ABCs with the mothers that are there. But if you've got other people in the mix that are sitting there,
Mhm.
you don't need to just talk about the kids. That's
Yeah.
just my
Yeah.
point of view.
I'm sure your point of view is appreciated by many listeners right now who feel like they're mired in like everyone else having children and them not knowing and like, oh my God, make it stop for a second. One more question before we wrap up today. I'm curious, like, how do you feel like your experience that you've had as someone who became a mom early in life, has lived in and raised their children in so many different places? How do you think that sort of compares to people who've either chosen not to have children or who maybe had them later in life? I'm interested in your sort of unique intersection, how you think that's defined you in your life path.
I think things would have done so differently. I don't think we would have moved overseas if we had children later. I think that, and if we had, maybe we'd have gone for a couple of years and come back. I, I, I think people are meant to have children when they're meant to have children. I always thought myself as having. My mum was an older mum, just because there was such a big age gap between myself and the rest. So I didn't want to be as old as my mum was, because I felt like I was left out. I felt like everyone else had young mums, which today isn't old at all. Back then it felt old because everyone else had young parents. But I just think everyone's journey is meant to be the way it is, whether you choose to have children, whether you don't have children, whether you have children later in life, whether you have kids when they're younger. I think I just did things differently. And it's funny because all my siblings had kids when they were younger as well. And I think we just did it not meant to do it, but I think we all knew we wanted to have children because we're all very close family and we all love kids. But I don't think I would be the person I am today. I think my relationship with kids would be very different because I would have been older. I probably would have had a lot more patience with them. I think when they were little, I didn't have as much patience as what I probably will have as a grandparent.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. That when you become a grandparent, you have like a lot of patience, and I think as an older parent, you would be too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if I could have done it any other way, because I love the relationship I have with the kids now, and I really appreciate the fact that we're not that. There's only a couple, like 20. There's 30 years between my youngest and I, and then there's like 23 between my oldest and I. And I think it's perfect. For me, it's perfect. But
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I'm glad for you and for your children and for the relationship that you have. It sounds like you're in a pretty cool stage and phase of life right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Tell us, where can we find you? As mentioned, we'll put you in the show notes. Maybe let us know. Do you know what your next trip is going to be with your group of women?
My next group is to Morocco. So I'm going to Morocco in September. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And then I'm off to Taiwan straight after that with another group. So you can find me on trulyexpattravel.com, and I'm on all the different platforms under Truly Expat Travel, or my podcast is Truly Expat Travel podcast.com.
I like the consistency. It's awesome. Okay. Again, we'll put that in the show notes of today's episode. Thank you, Paula, for joining us today. Is there anything else we missed that you want to share with us?
Not at all. I think the only thing I would like to probably say is that whatever decision you make is the right decision.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Did you know that you can not only listen to the Kids Are Childfree podcast, but you can actually also watch the Kids Are Childfree podcast by checking out the Kids Are Childfree YouTube channel? Yes, it is true. You know what? I love having these conversations with my guests, and I just feel like when we're able to immerse ourselves in the visual experience of these really important conversations, it lends just that much more. I've also been told, side note, Chris was totally teasing me the other day saying, my God, look at your expressions. He loves my very expressive face, but you can see me making all the faces, all the reactions when I talk to my guests. That in itself, I would say, is entertainment enough. No? In any case, check out the YouTube channel. Again, you'll find every episode of the Kids or Childfree podcast on there. And you can also check out a bunch of different short form videos on there, other podcasts that I've appeared on. We've got all kinds of good stuff for you, again, on the Kids Are Child Free YouTube channel, which I will link in the show notes of this episode. Make sure you subscribe when you head over there. And if there's an episode you love, leave us a little love, share some thoughts, ask some questions. I will do my very best to respond to each one of you over there on YouTube. All right, that is all from me. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day.